I should have my publicist write this down. This might be the first time I've never been able to answer a question. It's a really good question. By the way, more people need to ask questions like this that make people a little bit stumped. So it's actually great. And I didn't ask you to reword the question because it wasn't a good question. I wish that no one on the planet would ever spend as much time as I spent
On today's show, we have 2 times best-selling author, host of the Ken Coleman Show, Ramsey personality. I could continue to go on with everything that you've accomplished, but Ken, I'd like to start early on in your journey because there was, I think, really 3 core pillars throughout your childhood. There was ministry, history, and politics at a really young age. And I'm curious, what about your childhood made you want to go down the path that you're a part of now?
Well, I love that you pulled that out. That's very astute, and I think that the combination of those 3 things, um, absolutely shaped me as a person who wanted to make a difference in the lives of people. The ministry piece, watching my mom and dad serve people in the church, for very little money. I mean, we're talking low middle class, a very small church, didn't have much at all. They just love people, and so my entire life, I've seen my mom and dad serve people, in ministry. And so watching them serve others, love on others, pour into people certainly impacted me. History, my dad was a big history buff, and, I don't know how kids pick up stuff. I'm sure there's some things we reject, some things we accept. I also have a love of history, and we couldn't afford to go to Disney World or anything like that. So my dad would drag us all over the place to battlefields and presidential homes and things like that that were a lot cheaper. You could drive to them, and the tickets weren't that expensive. And so the love of history was something that I think I learned about the lives of great women and great men and what they did, how they did it, the impact they had on the world. So I think that put a little bug in me to say, what's your impact on history? And then the politics side of it was just an extension of those 2 things. I still believe that politics can do good. I know it's hard to believe that in today's world, but it is a form of public service. That's what it was meant to be. And at its purest, it's not a professional job, it's a servitude position. We don't see that anymore, unfortunately. So those 3 things all come together, and my interest in those, certainly my interest in politics, was shaped by the ministry and the history. And so when I realized that politics was not my path in my early 30s, um, it was very, very confusing. But then the roots of the work I do now, where I'm coaching people, and I'm doing interviews and, drawing out truths and nuggets from great thinkers and great leaders, that all is an extension, again, because everything I do right now is to encourage and equip people to be their best, whether it's a leader or someone who is starting a business, or someone who is early on in their professional path, or they've never figured out what they want to do with their life. The same theme is there. I want people to see their potential and realize their potential.
Yeah, and you're doing an amazing job at it. I find for a lot of people they get to much later in their life when they start to make serving the core of what they do, and it seems like from an early age, of course, your parents had a massive impact on you, just wanting to serve from the beginning, and it's very admirable. I try to take that exact approach, and I love that you went down that path. I know that early on in your journey, by 22, you were working for the governor. Like you went really quick early on, and you realized that that wasn't the path for you. But something that you've said is that we believe is that there's only one dream job, and of course that that's not the reality of it. When did that become? When did that belief shift for you?
Yeah. Well, love the question. 2 things. Um, First, I want to define what I believe a dream job is. Most people, when they hear the phrase dream job, they think this pie in the sky, unbelievably distant and impossible gig. That's really not the dream job. I understand that's what we as culture kind of make it, but the dream job to me is where you're spending the majority of your day, your week, your month, your year, using what you do best to do what you enjoy to produce results that matter deeply to you. So I'll just say that real quick again so you get that. It is spending the majority of your time using what you do best, talent, to do work you love, passion, to produce results that matter to you That's your mission in life. That's the dream job because it's going to feel euphoric. Famed psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi did all this research for over 30 years on flow. And that is essentially another way of saying flow. When you're using what you do best to do what you love to produce results that matter to you, you're going to feel a state of ecstasy or euphoria because it's so rewarding. So that's the first part. The second part of the question, remind me what the question was again, because I got so excited about explaining dream job. I got so in a rabbit hole. Hit
No, I
me
love it.
again.
No, I love it, and I'm excited to dive deeper into that as well. A lot of
Yeah.
people have a belief that there's only one dream job, and when did that
Oh,
belief
yeah,
shift for you?
Sorry. That's right. Okay. Thank you for the reminder. I got so excited on
I
really
love it.
defining dream job. So there is more than one. It's not a silver bullet. And the reason that there could be multiple dream jobs is because of the definition I just gave. That's why
Mhm.
I got lost in the definition, because I could walk away from what I'm doing today into another role where I'm using what I do best to do what I love to produce results that matter to me. And so it moves with you. And so the reason I think that your question is so important is that a lot of people look at their professional success and fulfillment as this one thing. And if I don't get it right, I'm screwed. Right. It's kind of like on the romantic side of things. Is there only one soulmate for you? You know? And if you think there is, then it's terrifying.
Mhm.
How do you make such a large decision, like the love of your life, who you're going to love and commit to? How do you make a decision? Okay, the direction, this is this mountaintop professionally that I want to climb. How do you make that decision if it's the only one? I mean, I don't know how you do that. It's terrifying. And I think a lot of people, that's why they get stuck on that. So it's really important to know that as long as you're using what you do best to do what you love to produce results that matter deeply to you, you're going to feel a tremendous amount of reward and you will make a significant contribution. And that's what it's about. So I figured that out in my early 30s when I made the big pivot. Everything I had been doing was leading up to this path to politics. And when I realized that I no longer wanted to go down that path, and I dealt with all the confusion and what have I been doing up to this point? Did I waste my life? You know, all this kind of crap that just was rolling around in my head. And once I did this self-discovery of, well, what is another path? What's an alternate path? That's when I realized it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the mindset that there's only one soulmate, there's only one dream job is coming from a place of lack, of scarcity instead of recognizing
Yeah,
that the world is abundant in itself, right? And you were,
that's right.
I'm so excited to dive into the proximity principle because I was doing it in my life without even really knowing that you wrote a book on it. So coming across your work, I was like, I'm so grateful that this is a thing. You've worked with John Maxwell, and then of course you're with Dave Ramsey now, two of the best leaders, thought leaders of really the world in itself. I'm curious throughout your time leading with both of them very, very high up. What are some lessons that you learned not only about yourself but about the world?
I learned that because I'm gonna answer the question the way you asked it.
Mhm.
Okay. What did I learn about myself following two great leaders like those guys? I learned that I have tremendous strength in some areas and I have glaring weaknesses in others. And when you follow men that are very successful like John Maxwell, Dave Ramsey, and you follow them up close, you realize that they're just men like you. Now they're well known, they're better known than I am. And they've certainly accomplished, a lot more than I have. But they still have glaring weaknesses. And yet they still continue to have tremendous impact. And I think watching and learning and following those guys the way I've been able to has allowed me to go, okay, you can have some glaring weaknesses. You can not be perfect. You can make some mistakes, make poor decisions, and still have a great impact. And so that's what I learned about myself following them. You also learn, I think it's one of two ways you can go. I think you could become a mimic if you're around really dynamic leaders like that and lose some of your identity because that's all you know. And there's such a dominant force. Both those guys are dominant personalities. And very charismatic, and you can become a knockoff version of them, or you can be you. And I certainly hope that I'm not being a knockoff version of them. I don't think I am. But you learn about yourself. You go, "Okay, what's my version of that?" So I think those are two things that come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You've definitely carved your own path. And the reason I ask that is because it's a glaring truth of the proximity principle in itself, right? It is a representation of doing so that has set yourself up for success. But something that I found, especially in people that are a part of the Ramsey community, is that they've always found a way to create opportunities for themselves, and in some way. And whether that is working with Dave Ramsey after you worked with John Maxwell and your own consulting company, like, what is it that allows people to create opportunities rather than just hoping for them, if that makes sense?
Drive.
Mm.
The difference between the creator and the hoper is drive. And drive comes from pain and passion, sometimes both. So let's take Dave Ramsey, for example. He's got a pretty interesting childhood. Most people don't know about his upbringing, but there's a lot of stuff there where he's really, really driven from that. The home, he talks about his mom and dad being in real estate, and kind of a push, drive. So there are environmental influences on all of us, and some environments drive more than others. And so environment's one thing, with the environment they grew up in, the way they see the world, some of the wounds and things of that nature. But if you look at the sheer pain that Dave went through when he lost everything, he's got 2 young kids, bankrupt, and the humiliation, the anger that he had towards himself, and I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to let this happen to anybody else. I mean, there's a deep drive there, an unbelievable passion to help people never go through what he went through, or to help people get out of it. And so there's a tremendous drive there. So where's the drive coming from? But that's the answer, is drive. People that are hopers and not doing much, they don't have enough going on inside of them, inside their head and heart, to make them get out and go for it and risk. They're kind of sitting on the bleachers of life going, I hope somebody notices me. Or they got one foot on the field and they're going, okay, I'm just going to take a shot here. I'm going to go buy the lottery ticket. I'll do enough to get the ticket, but I hope somebody punches it. Those aren't drivers. And drivers, there's something that's fueling their action. Sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's unhealthy, but a good mix of healthy and unhealthy still is, we're going to see it come out on the positive, I believe. So that's the answer, I believe. There's a difference between hoping and wishing and driving towards it.
Absolutely. And there's multiple different areas where you pivoted, and I'm going to use the word pivot throughout a lot of this conversation because you've made a lot of pivots. Like you said, early in your early 30s, you pivoted to broadcasting, thought it was going to be sports. Then you moved to something that actually fulfilled you. You realized that there wasn't the results there that actually gave you something. You're running a small business, had 3 kids at the time, were willing to pay for broadcasting on the weekends. Like, there was so much that I go back to that you created the opportunity for yourself. I'm curious, for people that want to make a pivot in their life, what do you feel is the best way to prepare for a pivot? If that makes sense.
Well, you got to know where you're going first.
Mhm.
So a pivot without knowing where you're going is just kind of, again, a wish. We're going to just kind of strike out and hope we land. So before we pivot, we got to know where we're pivoting to. So I'm a basketball nerd. Okay.
Yep.
So I hear the word pivot all the time. So if you non-sports fans, stay with me on this. So when you asked the question, I immediately thought pivoting. So
Yep.
how do we pivot? Usually pivot is before we dribble the ball. So let's use a big man down in the paint in basketball, and he gets the ball, the guard or the forward passes the ball into the big guy, and he's down in the paint, okay, in the free throw area for you non-sports fans, and they've got the ball, okay, and you can pivot in the game of basketball. You can pivot off of one foot. You could choose your anchor foot, but once you commit to that pivot foot, you can turn around, complete 360, As long as that foot doesn't move, it pivots, it doesn't pick up, it stays on the floor. And sometimes you'll see guys and they're pivoting right, pivoting left, and they know where they're trying to go. So, for example, if I get the ball down here in the paint and the basket is over my shoulder right here, okay? And in this picture here, for those of you watching, boy, this is Kurt, my publicist, is probably going nuts right now. He's an X's and O's guy. But let's say the basket is right here, okay? It's right over here. And I've got a defender right here.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So he's kind of shading to this side. So I want to pivot this way, right? So I might lean my shoulder this way to get the defender going one way, but I'm going to spin and pivot towards the basket here. The point is, my pivot is determined based on the direction. Where do I want to go? And now I pivot. So the idea of just pivoting to the next thing and trying, certainly that's a strategy. I don't think it's the best strategy. So to your question, fundamentally, you've got to know where it is or a general direction where you want to go. And now I pivot that way, because that's really what a pivot is. I'm swinging, I'm moving. I was here and now I'm going to reposition myself. Pivoting is a repositioning. And so where am I going? And so if I'm pivoting towards something specifically, what it means is I'm repositioning myself to get closer.
Absolutely. And I'm excited.
So you got to know where you're going.
Absolutely. The 7 steps, the first step is obviously get clear, and you have to get clear on where
there
you're going.
It is.
And next is get qualified. We can dive through them, but how does someone get clear? Because one thing that we definitely align in on so much is that everyone has a unique purpose. Everyone is one of one. You are here for a reason. If you don't put your unique gifts into the world, you're doing a disservice. And I think it's very important to go towards something that you actually feel in alignment with, like you talk about the talent, purpose, and mission. But how can someone get clear on where they want to go if they don't have any idea?
Yeah. Okay. So we get clear on ourselves. There's 2 things we want to get clear on. 1, our design, and 2, our story. Okay. Our design, I believe that there are 3 threads that are in all of us. Talent, that's what we do best. These are the God-given things that just come easy to you. You tend to be better at these things than others. Passion is, I light up, I lose track of time. I'm immersed, totally immersed in something because I love the task itself. I love the role. And then what motivates me? What results motivate me? Am I motivated by efficiency, or am I motivated by influence? Am I motivated by achievement, or am I motivated by service? I want to get clear on what I'm really good at doing. That's talent. What I love to do, passion, and then what results motivate me. That's mission. And so that's the methodology in the book, Paycheck to Purpose. And then we have the Get Clear Work Assessment. People can actually take an assessment. We'll measure all 3 of those things. It's called the Get Clear Work Assessment, KenColeman.com. Now, that's design. So I got to get clear on how I'm wired, if you want to use that method, that language. So that's how I'm designed. And so that's huge. But also we got to look back to our story, the environment we grew up in, our worldview, what shaped the way I see the world. The environment my parents created in the home certainly has an impact on the way I see the world. And then the experiences I've had, the hurts, the rejections, the wins, the failures, you get the point. So if I look at how I'm designed first, and then I look at my environment growing up and my experience in life to this point, that all shapes my heart and my worldview, the way I see the world, the way I think it should be, and then the problems that grip my heart. So all that said, that's what getting clear is, getting aware. Because if I go, all right, I know what I'm good at, I know what I love to do, and I know the results that I care deeply about, and I now know the why. I know the why. I know what shaped me. So this is who I am. And so a clear person becomes a confident person. And a confident person will be courageous when the time requires. But if the time comes that requires great courage and you are not clear on who you are and why you are the way you are and where you're going and why you're going there, you will not be courageous. You cannot summon courage like the willpower to not eat ice cream. It's just not there. You must be clear. And that will give you the confidence to step out and then the courage to stay.
So powerful. It's so powerful. You've spoken to over 6,000 people through your time in broadcasting, probably more than that even. What are the commonalities that you find in people's stories that hold them back?
Um, the commonalities are fear, doubt, and pride.
Mhm.
So fear is I'm worried that something bad is going to happen if I move forward. Doubt is I don't believe that something good will happen if I move forward. And pride is I care more about what other people say and think than what I actually believe.
Mhm.
And so those are the three enemies of progress. And I think you can take every other voice, you can get nuanced on it. Like I'm afraid of being rejected, or I'm afraid of failing, or I'm afraid of the unknown, or I'm whatever. Again, you can bucket them into those three things: fear, doubt, and pride. And you can't overcome, you cannot remove those voices, um, but you can overcome them, because anybody that's moving forward in life is going to continually encounter those voices. And so understanding that that's just part of the journey if you're moving forward is huge. You go, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm doing something right. If I'm afraid, if I'm doubtful, if I'm prideful, I know that I'm moving forward. I know that I'm at least trying. And that's a good sign. And we're all the same in that regard. Those are the three things that trip us up.
Yeah, I always tell people that if you don't feel imposter syndrome, you're probably not getting out of your comfort zone enough, because that means you're probably not putting
100%.
yourself in positions to grow, really. That's the best way to put it. I know when you were 7 years
Yeah.
old, your dad told you that your time will come, and early
Mm.
on, there was a lot of moments in your life where your story probably didn't serve the person that you are today. So I'm curious,
Hmm.
was it proof through just showing up and doing multiple different things that reinforced the person you became, or what allowed you to stay patient in things when the results weren't there and really become the person that you are today?
Yeah, two things: belief in myself and belief in the process.
Mm,
So back to the lesson my dad told me, it came true pretty early in my life. I'm a little kid playing soccer. I'm the smallest guy, 7 to 9 year old league, and I look like I'm 5. And, listen, I was itty bitty. I never played soccer before. So two things: number one, I sucked, and two, I was small. So it's not a good combination. And back in those days, everybody didn't play equal time. I know,
oh,
I
yeah.
know. I seem like a dinosaur. But back in those days in youth soccer, they treated it like real sports. They played the good kids. So guess who didn't play? This guy. And, but I had a heart to compete. And so I'll never forget, on that drive home, I'm crying and just kind of, wispy and all that kind of stuff. And my dad sees me in the rearview mirror and he kind of says, "What's up, buddy?" And I just, gone.
Yeah.
And, "I want to play," something, like that. And, he just said, "Look, you're the smallest guy, you're the youngest guy. You keep staying at it, keep showing up, and your time will come. You got the talent. You're going to be a good soccer player." 2 years later, led the league in scoring. Can you tell it mattered? I'm 9 years old and I still remember it. Made the travel team, the select team. And that was a real moment for me. It was a real moment for me. That lesson has sustained me so many times, because I believed in the process and I believed in my talent. So I didn't put myself in places where I didn't have the talent to actually let the process work. So that's key, And so, when I started out in my 30s in broadcasting, I really did believe I had the chops. I believe that I had the chops on the mic, that I had the raw talent. I knew I had to work at it. I knew I had to learn some things, some fundamentals of broadcasting. I mean, I took that stuff very serious, as much as I did the fundamentals of basketball, you know? So I did believe I had the talent. And then I also believe that the process, meaning if I keep showing up and keep showing up in the right place, then the right time eventually shows up. But it's not the other way around. Like, we don't just show up and go, "Well, wasn't the right time today. Forget that. I'm gone." No, you keep showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up. I think of Tom Brady, he's the greatest quarterback to ever play. And the guy wasn't a starter at Michigan when he played in college football. Wasn't a starter the first couple of years. He was booed mercilessly. Not a star at Michigan. 7th-round draft pick. He's behind Drew Bledsoe. At the time, was on a path to a certain Hall of Fame status at the time. And one injury, and he's ready. He steps in, never looks back. Kurt Warner, guy's stocking grocery shelves, just to stay alive, to feed his wife and young kids, stocking shelves and doing arena football. And then a scout for the Rams sees him, calls him up, same deal. He's a backup quarterback. He's never going to get in the game. Trent Green blows his knee out. Kurt Warner goes in. What's going on there? Was that just straight, right place, right time? No, it was both of those guys stayed with it, and they kept staying with it with maybe very little hope at all to ever be starting quarterbacks. And then somebody gets injured, and they step in. And that belief and the process that got them there won out. I mean, it's that simple. Two of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play. Neither one of them were starting quarterbacks in hype draft picks. Neither one of them. So, you can make the case that neither one of those guys, both of them Hall of Famers, Brady will be, but neither one of them become Hall of Famers if they quit.
This podcast is kindly brought to you by Magic Mind. Now, if you're anything like me, you love coffee, but you hate the jitters that it gives you in that 2 p.m. slump in the afternoon when you still have a lot of day left, but you're not able to be focused throughout that time. And this is why I love Magic Mind. I've been taking it with my morning coffee. It's a small productivity shot that I absolutely love. It's with matcha, which takes longer to release in your body. So instead of feeling slumped at 2 p.m., you actually have that intentional focus and it reduces stress. So I take it with my morning coffee. It helps me drink less coffee, but actually feel focused and not wired throughout the day, which is so impactful because if you're a podcaster or you're taking calls or you're just in general, you need to be focused and have that mental energy. It's been something that's really helpful for me. I've been using it for a few weeks and I guarantee that you will like it. So if you're anything like me and you want to feel focused but not wired, you can go to magicmind.com/youcan2 for 56% off. Yes, 56% off your first subscription. And for your first one-time payment, you can get 20% off, which is insane to say the least because they have a 100% money back guarantee with no questions asked. And instead of waiting 3 to 5 days for that money back, they'll refund you in 3 to 4 hours because they believe in it. And I believe in it so much. So that's magicmind.com/youcan2 for up to 56% off your first subscription. And if you already use Magic Mind, you can get a discount off your next subscription payment as well. So it's magicmind.com/youcan2. Try it for a few weeks, see if you like it. I bet you that you will, and you will feel a lot more intentional with your day instead of just so wired and really just exhausted by the end of the day. Back to the episode. It's at least the belief that I've taken on is if I focus on direction instead of results, if I show up enough times and I'm in the right position, there is success is inevitable. And that's exactly what you're saying there is they put themselves in a position to
100%.
succeed and they did that, right? For you,
Yep.
you started in broadcasting when you were 30. Obviously, you were. I know that there was moments in time where there was people. You started in football on Saturdays, and like your journey is awesome, man, and I love it. And I think for a lot of people, they don't have that belief because they don't have the proof. So, do you think that you had the belief because you had the competence in it, or do you think that you had the belief simply because your dad ingrained that into you when you were a child?
Well, first of all, I had belief because I believe that God gave me the talent to actually be used.
Mm.
So it does speak to my faith that I'm not a random creature of the Big Bang. I'm designed by the great creator. So I really believe that. And so the talent's not an accident.
Mm.
So I did believe I had the talent. I had done enough in my life on a microphone or on a stage that I felt like I had the chops. I really did. I felt like I had enough proof to go, if I get in and practice and work on it, I believe that I can be really good at this. So I did have that belief, but I also believe there's a bigger story being told. That the longing, the calling, this pull, I mean, I was always pulled toward the spotlight, towards the stage. Other people are pulled towards making something with their hands. It's the same experience. So I knew enough from my faith that I was being called. There was something that was pulling me and it was way bigger than me. That was one thing. I also believed that I had the chops, that if somebody gave me a shot, and told me what to do, that I could repeat, So I really, from that standpoint, just kind of in my greatest days of doubt, there were days where I'd go, I don't know if I'm ever going to make it. I'm too late to this game. I'm in my 30s. I'm too old. But I never doubted my ability. I did doubt that it was going to happen. I never doubted that I had the chops. So call it self-awareness and where that confidence comes from, because I had enough evidence that I could do it.
It's really powerful. I think for a lot of people that's a it's a hard belief to take on, but that faith, that belief that something is going to happen, that you have the ability to create it, it makes sense because you had the proof from working with John Maxwell and everyone else that you created the opportunities. I'm going to go back to. Um, a statistic that you've talked a lot about is that 7 to 8 out of 10 people aren't engaged in their work. That we create test takers and not pathfinders, and I find it is so true. I have a very similar belief on you when it comes to college. I never went to college, never made sense for me. Always thought of what's the direction I want to go, how can I create that? For people that and we talked about a little bit about clarity, but what does it mean to really create an opportunity for yourself? That second step of after gain clarity. What does that look like for someone?
Well, once I'm clear on where I want to go, and so let's use the mountaintop here again, then I've got to figure out what is it going to take to climb the mountain.
Mhm.
So, Kilimanjaro and Everest are two very different, you know, are there some similarities? Sure. But the second thing is I've got to get qualified and I've got to get connected. That's stages 2 and 3. And I'm doing those at the same time. So I knew in my story that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I thought it was going to be sports broadcasting. And so in that moment, I'm going, all right, I've got to get some basic training. So I did a broadcasting school. So I knew that I needed to learn the basics, the fundamentals. And I knew I needed to get connected. So getting qualified and getting connected, I had to do some stuff, some little stuff. I was doing football play-by-play, high school football play-by-play. I was doing some other stuff for a local sports talk station. So I was just getting some cuts at the plate, if you will, to use a batting cage baseball analogy, just getting some experience, which was helping me. And I was getting some training. And so that was getting qualified. And while I was doing that, I was making connections. And, while you're getting qualified, and let's say that you have to have a degree. And not everybody needs a degree. But let's say you're in a field where it does require a degree. Well, then I got 4 years, or if I got a grad school on top of that, so I got 6 years, whatever. So whatever is actually qualified, gets you qualified. So that could be a boot camp, a programming boot camp or something like that. What do I have to do? What do I have to learn for the educational qualification? And then what experience do I need? So it's education and experience. It's one of the two or both. And so once I know what that is, all right, I set about going to do that. But while I'm doing that, I should be connecting. The proximity principle says in order to do what you want to do, you got to be around people who are doing it or in places where it is happening. A little fancy way of saying the right people plus the right places equals opportunity. And so I can be getting around the right people and in the right places where I meet more of the right people who then point me to more of the right places. And it becomes a cycle of connecting, and it is connecting where we get opportunities. And so that's what you're doing. Those two things, getting qualified and getting connected. And that will lead you to the opportunity to get started.
The challenge for most people is the getting started, right? And there's a quote that I heard from you that when people know they're valuable, they start to act valuable. They put themselves into positions to create an opportunity for yourself. But if you don't believe that opportunity is there for you, belief drives behavior. You're not going to behave in ways to make it happen if you don't believe it's meant for you. So, what are some core beliefs? Again, I'm going to go back to you've spoken with over 6,000 people on air. Like, what are some of the commonalities that you found or beliefs that hold people back from just getting started?
Well, let's go back to those three enemies. So it's going to be fear, doubt, and pride again.
Yeah.
So they come back at the starting line. They certainly are there in the get clear, and they'll poke their head up in the get qualified, and they'll poke their head up in the get connected. Well, I want to reach out to this guy, and he's pretty successful. I got a mutual connection. Do I really want to do it? Do I want to put myself out there? So those enemies keep popping up all the time. And so the getting started, you're right, is really difficult because now I've got to actually do it. I have been thinking about doing it. I've been preparing to do it. And now the moment comes where, am I going to start, right? Are we going to shoot the firing pistol? And am I going to get out of the blocks, or am I going to stay in there paralyzed? And the reason that the start is so hard is because there's such a level of the unknown. I mean, that's just the nature of starting anything new. You have to embrace the suck. And I think it's hard for us to embrace sucking. I think it's hard for us to embrace the unknown when I start on this path. And so again, that's doubt, that's fear, and that's pride. Are people going to think I look crazy for doing this and blah, blah, blah. So that's pride. What am I doing? This is your chance. Don't waste any more time and money than you already have. That's doubt. Um, what if I do this and nobody wants me? What if that's fear, failure, rejection. So those voices keep popping up at the starting line. But if you talk to anybody that's been successful, they'll tell you that the first step is the most important. And the second most important step is the second step. And now we've got some inertia. And now we're moving. And you just have to embrace the unknown and embrace the suck, knowing that those are part of the deal. So you might as well embrace it. You're not going to get around it. So let's go do it. If I want to take care of myself, sometimes I have to get a shot. It stings. But what do? You man up, you woman up. You go, all right, this is going to sting. I know I need the shot. It's going to suck. It's going to be sore for a couple of days, but I got to get the shot. I'm going to get the shot, or whatever it is. So I think that it's just understanding that every time you start something new or any stage or anything, you're stepping on a new rung of the ladder as you're getting promoted professionally. Every time we start something, those voices get really loud. And so we repeat the process. How do we overcome fear, doubt, and pride? All right. Are they telling me the truth and protecting me? Or are they lying and holding me back? And that's how you do it. And so you put it on the witness stand. What's the voice I'm dealing with? Well, the voice says, write it down. This is what I'm afraid of. This is what I doubt. And write it out. And is there any evidence to support it? If there is, well, we need to stop, slow down, and go, wait a second. This is a natural fear. But if there's no evidence that the fear or doubt are true, then we know it's holding us back. And we go, all right, let me get clear again. Number one, I'm clear that fear, doubt, and pride are lying to me. Number two, I know that I've got the talent to do this. And I know that I care deeply. I love this work, and I know I care deeply about these results. And so you remind yourself that you're absolutely moving forward on purpose. And then you'll just see those voices scatter like cockroaches when you turn a light on.
When you got into broadcasting, you had a friend that was close to you that didn't really believe in the journey of you stepping into this space, right? And I know that you had the belief that it was going to take about 5 to 7 years to get into it, and it ended up taking about 7.5. I'm curious, is it just the calling in you that kept you going, or how do people know when to quit, to take a step back, to go back to, or to go down a different path rather than continuing forward?
Well, I love this question. It's a really insightful question. It's belief and calling at first, and then it's momentum at somewhere else on the journey. So it's belief from the calling, belief that it could be and should be, must be, right? That gets you going.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you've done your homework on the front end, you actually have the talent, you know that at some point you get some momentum, right? And so it's a nice little pass off. It's kind of like the 4x100 meter relay,
Mm-hmm.
You pass the baton, you start off with belief, right? And or calling, and then you go, I believe, whatever you want to say. And at some point you hand off to momentum of, look, I'm actually making progress. Progress is a tremendous confirmation for us when we're just making progress. It doesn't even have to be huge. So that's what happened. Along the way, I was making progress. And it was like, okay, I got this, and I'm getting some accolades. I'm getting some affirmation, seeing some success, seeing some growth, and then this is happening, and it didn't happen super fast, and then all of a sudden, boom! One day, Dave Ramsey calls, and it's like, hey, do you want a seat on a rocket ship? So, it's belief and calling that gets you started. It's momentum of progress that keeps you going.
Yeah. I know you had a conversation with Seth Godin. I don't even know how long ago it was, but it was that a big takeaway from it was that people are risk averse, or they're not risk averse, they're ambiguity averse. And I think I'd love for you to dive into that, the discrepancy between the two, because I think a lot of people think they're risk averse, but that's not the reality of it.
Yeah, this is from my book, One Question. It was actually Jim Collins,
Yeah.
who wrote Good to Great. And I asked him, why don't people go after great results or great life professionally? Why Why do so many people just kind of settle for average and just a safe job and basic job? And he said that most people are ambiguity averse, not risk averse. In other words, what was brilliant. Of course, Jim Collins is so brilliant. So, he went on to say, if I give you the option to paint by numbers, then you go, okay, well, this is great because you just tell me what to do. And I just go, okay, blue on 1, green on 2, red on 3, all that. And what he was saying is it's a whole different deal. Like, that's your safe corporate job. It's a whole nother deal to go start your own thing or go your own path or whatever, because it's a blank canvas. And so he was drawing a clear distinction between the reason that people don't go for it and try to be great is because there's so much ambiguity. There's so much unknown when you're moving forward, right? And so we couch it as, well, I don't want to take a big risk. It's not the risk that's what got you worried. You don't even know what's out there. And it's the equivalent of you and I going whitewater rafting, right? I'm trying to think of some kind of there's some risk associated with whitewater rafting.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm guessing I've never done it. I have no desire to get tousled and thrown around, but I guess you could have a concussion, scrapes, bruises, broken bones. Okay, but they tell you all that. And they show you the video and then you sign the waiver and you kind of go, all right, I know what I'm getting into. I've seen the videos. I'm watching people get out of the boat. I sat through the safety class. I know what I'm about to face. But if you and I go in a dark black cave with no flashlights at all, nothing, and you can't see the hand in front of your face, and we're just kind of easing along, hand on the side, that's horrifying because we don't know what's in there. That's the idea of we are ambiguity averse, the idea that we want to know what's in front of us. And so that's what holds so many people back, is because in order to grow and max out your potential and do that thing, you're going to have to navigate some unknowns. And that's the biggest fear. And I believe he's right. The fear of the unknown is the most crippling fear.
Absolutely. It goes back to the fact that we have ancient brains trying to deal with modern day problems. If we don't know something, then we are going to try to stay stuck where we are, even if we'd rather stay in a discontent reality than an unknown, a better reality. And that's just the core of it. And
That's right.
you've said before that people aren't stuck; they've chosen to stay put. And it's such a mindset shift, and I think it forces people to take responsibility for where they're at, rather than trying to blame their circumstances or their experience that they grew up with. As we spoke about
That's right.
earlier, you grew up and maybe smaller and didn't get the playing time early on. What was it throughout your journey that allowed you to change the story that you told yourself, and also in relation to other people? How were they able to change their story?
Well, you got to make sure that the story that's in your head is correct. And I love what you said, change your story. So, going back to that kind of moment in my childhood, I had to believe my dad's story. His story was, if you keep practicing, you're going to keep growing. You're going to get bigger and faster. You're going to get better, and you're going to get some playing time. And so I had to choose to believe that story or the story that I'm too small, I'm pathetic, and I should never play sports again, right? And
Mhm.
so I chose to believe the narrative that my dad gave me. And I think that you have to make sure it's the right story. The right story is enormous. You got to propel yourself based on, look, I have a chance to rewrite something, or I have a chance to write the next page. And for me, it was always, without knowing it. Now I know it. I can look back on it, but I didn't have this kind of foresight, or, you're a kid. But as a kid and in middle school, I was big into sports. But I was never the most athletic. I was never the biggest, the fastest. I was a decent athlete, but I would never give myself more than just a good to decent score. And so take soccer. Soccer was probably my best sport. I loved basketball the most, but soccer was probably my best sport because I just was really good at controlling and kicking the ball. So I began to figure out, okay, number one, I can kick the ball with my left foot, even though I'm a right-footed dominant player. Most kids that are right-footed can't kick with their left foot. So if I can start to kick with my left foot and do it with some control and power, guess who becomes valuable? Me. And so as I advanced into better leagues, I always got playing time and usually started largely because of my ability to kick the ball, both feet, and excuse me, but specifically kick with my left foot. That made me valuable. And then I was a kicking specialist. So I took corner kicks, direct kicks, because I could move the ball.
Mhm.
And I worked on that. And I realized it was something that I naturally was able to do because you kind of just figured out one day, like, oh, I can actually put that ball kind of where I want to off my foot. And so let's keep working on that. So as I did in soccer, the same thing professionally, it's like, what am I naturally gifted at that if I work on it, I become valuable? And early on for me, it was being an interviewer,
Mhm.
asking really good questions. And I, begin to work on that and craft that and realize, okay, that makes me valuable, number one. But I've got more depth there. I got more room that I can grow there. And so let's go do that, And so that's what led me further down the path. As I was developing my own voice, in large part because I was sitting with so many impressive people and digging from them, it was like I was a human sponge. So as I did in soccer, realizing kind of where's my uniqueness, where's my ability to where I can be more valuable. Let's go hone in on that. So that's what I did in soccer and in any sport. Same thing in basketball. It's like, okay, I'm not the highest jumper, not the best shooter, but I handle the ball well. I pass well. I see the floor, so, okay, what's my role? I play good defense. So I became that player. And that there's a great lesson there in that understanding your uniqueness is critical to achieving greatness. You can't achieve greatness outside of your uniqueness, but when you understand and embrace and leverage your uniqueness, then you got a chance for greatness.
It's so very true. It's so very true. You leaned into it. I find that a lot of people, they lean into their strengths rather than trying to even out their weaknesses. I guess I would say throughout your journey. Obviously, you're an amazing interviewer, and I want to definitely dive into the side of interviewing. But what skill do you wish you developed earlier?
Writing, I've always been a verbal guy, very verbal processing. I wish I had worked on writing skills earlier. Um, I would say that one stands out to me.
Yeah. There's I think a lot of your work is changing people's belief systems, and that's why a lot of this podcast has been a lot of reframing people's belief systems, whether it's about themselves or about the world that they go through. And one belief that I heard from you that really definitely changed my perspective was burnout isn't burnout, but it's buildup. And I think that's a big mindset shift for a lot of people because they think it just happens at one point, but there's so much that leads to that. What are some common signs that you found, maybe even in your own experience or people that you've spoken to, that are signs of burnout?
Yeah, so burnout is very real, but it is a symptom. Just
Mm.
like me going to the doctor and going, "Hey, I've got a sore knee." And the doctor goes, "All right." And he's examining the knee and he's trying to figure out what could have caused the pain, and isolate where the actual injury is, what's causing the actual pain, and then what caused the injury, right? And so that's the idea when I say that there's a buildup in, I think, 5 areas that lead to burnout. So you don't want to go, well, I'm burned out. Now what? No, let's dive into what's causing the burnout. So I think there's a buildup of 5 things. One, a buildup of no passion for your work. There's no purpose or passion in the work. It's just a job. Two, toxic environment. You're just in an awful toxic environment where you could be loving the work, the job itself, but the people around you are just unbelievably debilitatingly awful. And you start going, I don't want to go be around that. And it just sucks the life out of you. And that can build up. Um, uh, Three is uh, you're not rewarded for your work. You're not recognized or rewarded. You're coming in, you're doing a good job, and you're not hearing any attaboys or attagirls. There's no reward. There's no monetary reward. No other kind of intrinsic rewards. You're just kind of you're doing a good job, but you don't hear any affirmation for it. That's bone crushing. And next is boredom. You can be absolutely bored out of your skull. You know, you can believe how many people experience burnout just from being bored. You're just kind of scrolling through, trying to just, the day's taking a very, very long time, you know, a very, very long time. And then another cause is there's just been some straight rejection, you know. There's a difference between being overlooked and kind of not rewarded or recognized, and then just straight up rejection.
Mhm.
And you know what? You keep putting your hand up, you keep going, hey, I want a chance. Give me a shot, coach. Put me in, you know, give me a promotion. I want to do more. I feel like I just, you know, and you keep doing that. You keep getting rejected. Um, Again, that begins to build up on the heart. You know what I mean? And so the example that I use is any one of those five things. If I, it's like a heavy coat. And so if I put my hand on my heart right now and I'm quiet and I press in, I can feel my heart beating. But if I put on a heavy coat and then another heavy coat, another heavy coat,
Mhm.
and another heavy coat, and I put my hands back on my heart and I press, there's so many layers between my hand and heart. I know my heart's beating because I'm alive, but I can't feel it. I think that's the idea of those things that build up on our heart and they cover us up. And I really feel like it's a soul level kind of ache. That's what burnout really is. It does manifest itself. Another cause is being overworked. You know, there can be some straight physical causes, but of all the ones I gave you, I actually gave you six. Five of them are, I think, more emotional than they are physical. Do they have physical effects? Yes. But five out of those six are actual emotional. And it's the heart. And my heart's not engaged or my heart is hurt or whatever. And it just kind of covers us up, covers up, covers up. And we're not thriving or feeling the right emotions around work. And that's when burnout sets in.
Such a great analogy. I haven't heard it that way, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to actually tangibly understand that through a different lens, which is so powerful. I have two last questions for you, Ken. My first question is more so for me and my audience, of course, but you, like you said, you're a great interviewer, but you can take this whether personal or professional. What's something that you spent a lot of time on that whether I or my audience should skip entirely?
Something that I've spent a lot of time on that you should skip. Man, I should have my publicist write this down. This might be the first time I've never been able to answer a question. It's a really good question. Um, the way my brain is processing it is not the right way. Re-ask that question in a different way and see if it gets my brain going.
What's something that you spent a lot of time on throughout your life that you wish maybe you could have shortened that path? Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much time on, you should have spent it on a different thing. Maybe it's a
Okay.
career choice, whatever that looks like.
Okay. That helps me. Really, by the way, you asked a great question, such a good question. This is good. By the way, more people need to ask questions like this that make people stumped, a little bit stumped. So it's actually great. And
Thank
I
you.
didn't ask you to reword the question because it wasn't a good question. Um, I wish that no one on the planet would ever spend as much time as I spent thinking about harmful comments that were said to me by people that were close to my life. How about that? Now, that's kind of a wish, but I think the way that I'm wired, I didn't waste my time on a lot of stuff, but I spent my time, I spent a lot of time and too much time dwelling on some hurts and some rejections that created a narrative that I kept asking, is this true?
Mm.
And that's my honest answer on that. It takes a while to mature and to get healthy to a place where you can go, gosh, that is so crazy. And I can see how I allowed that to stay in my head and affect my heart for a long time. And yeah, so for people that are younger, I go get that stuff fixed early on. Like, be okay, sitting with a therapist and going, I need to get to the core of why I think this way. And that would be good.
Yeah. That's why I'm a sponge for this. So I asked that question because I think it's
It's a great question. It's an
thank,
incredible question.
thank you. It's funny because the last question I ask every guest is the one that usually stumps people. So I'm going to ask you, and hopefully
Oh boy, here we go.
it gives you a tough response as well. My last question I always ask everyone is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
I think in some ways it's very related.
You think?
Um, okay, this is good. I don't know if what I'm about to say is good. It's good that you're asking this. So
Take
this
it.
is coming from a therapy session. Um, I've had a chip on my shoulder for decades based on a couple of incidents between my dad and I, because I was a low performing student with high performing potential. And he made some comments that I think were in the moment of frustration because I was not bringing home good grades. And he said, if you don't get your acting gear, I'm paraphrasing, you're going to be pumping gas the rest of your life. And you need to understand this. Like, back then, when you went to the gas station, you could put it in yourself, or a guy would come out and pump your gas. And it was in his mind, I guess, a menial position or whatever. But I trust me, I got it.
Mhm.
And the way I received that at 14 or 15, I think it was about 14, that was like wearing a heavy coat for years, decades. And I can slip into it pretty easily, even now. So what I am learning to unbelieve, if that's how you put it, is that I don't have to prove myself through sheer force all the time. I've lived for decades attempting and proving myself through force, like so much intensity. And so learning uh, to not believe that narrative could still be true, that I'm not enough, that I wouldn't be successful, and not having to prove that all the time. Because when you're always trying to prove it, you can be forceful. And so that's what I'm dealing with. It's been
Can
really good. Doesn't happen overnight, but walk and act in the power of transparency, which is why I'm being so transparent. I'm sharing this. Nobody's ever heard me say this, but I there's power in vulnerability, as opposed to the intensity of force. And so I've been a guy that defaults to intensity of force as opposed to the power and vulnerability. So I'm trying to get better at that.
I'm right with you on that. So much. And I know throughout your story, it started really early for you. And that's why I asked that question, because I think for so many people, there's never a point where we've arrived. And especially the kind of mindset that we have, it's the force mentality. It's definitely it's a habit to go forward, and sometimes we need to take a different perspective through that. And I hope that I can bring some vulnerability out of everyone. That's why I asked that exact question. So thank you so much for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing everything that
Yeah.
you brought to the podcast. Truly grateful for you. And of course, all of your links will be in the show notes. But is there anywhere you'd like to direct people?
They can follow me on social media at Ken Coleman. And the website's kencoleman.com for all the resources and any kind of connection points to the show and beyond that. And thanks for having me. I got to tell you, very insightful questions. The future's bright for you, young man.